a backstory there, I'm absolutely sure. So can you tell us how you went from this little boy in Al-Fahim who hated Israel to the man who sits here today, a Muslim Zionist who loves Israel, who loves his people? What's the story? What happened?
I grew up in my family. My family is very traditional, not conservative and not religious. We're traditional. My grandmother, from my mother's side, was born in a Palestinian refugee camp. So I have family on the other side, and most of them are working and actually high-ranking in the Palestinian Authority. And I would spend my summer breaks in school. I would spend my summer breaks in the Palestinian refugee camp in Tulkarm. And one of my core memories as a child was me playing outside, and suddenly my mother comes and gets me into the house while I was in this refugee camp. I go into the house, and my mother tells me that there's a curfew now. The army said there's a curfew, nobody's allowed out. And a few hours after this, I see a tank driving on the street. And let me tell you, as a little child, you play with tanks and soldiers, but once you see a tank driving on the street, that's a thing you remember. I remember the ground was shaking, vibrating. It's loud. It's a memory that you remember. So I grew up in that area, and in Al-Fahim, which is within Israel proper, I was raised to the ideology that I am not Israeli, even though I hold the citizenship. I have full rights within Israel. I'm disconnected from my Israeli identity. A, because there's history that was twisted and taught to me, and B, because we are being oppressed by Israel. That's what we're always told. You're being oppressed by Israel. And I grew up with that kind of mentality, and I was not unique. Everybody grew up with that kind of mentality, and still until today. I continue to see more and more people. I would go to school, and I would hear it from my teacher. I would turn on the television, and I would hear it from the TV. Kind of this anti-Semitic white noise, I call it. It's not direct. It's always in the background. The lies, the blood labels, all of that. And if I just recount one thing in school, whenever we were taught about history, we were always taught about history past 1948. We were never taught anything about the Holocaust. The only sentence that I got about the Holocaust was from my religion teacher, who told us that Hitler did a good thing. This is the white noise that I spoke about. It's always constant in the background, all the time, everywhere you go. So what do we expect from people who grew up in such an environment? I grew up in that environment, and I held those ideologies because that's what everybody believed. And I went in high school, if I remember, in high school. I started working in a hotel in Tel Aviv, and suddenly I was accepted for who I am. I was very worried of how everybody would accept me, coming from my town and the ideologies and the thinking that I had. I was very accepted. There were no stereotypes that were applied to me just because I'm Arab or just because I come from this place. I found my fellow Jews, my Jewish peers, Israeli peers, and they accepted me, and we became friends, and we started talking. We would talk, and a lot of Israelis would tell you that they have Arab friends, and it's true, but they rarely talk about subjects that actually matter: politics, current events, geopolitics, and that thing is very important to discuss. If I recall, one of the moments, the core moments where a light bulb just went into my head was when I was waiting for the bus, and I met a Jewish rabbi, and it was just before Sukkot. And he approached me and said he thought I was Jewish. So he was telling me how important it is to keep the holiday and do the mitzvot. And at the end, I didn't speak Hebrew very well. So I told him in broken Hebrew, I said, "I'm sorry to waste your time, but I'm not Jewish." I expected a very negative response because that was implanted in me. They always warned me of how I would be treated because of who I am. And to my surprise, that man, not only did he accept me, but he extended an olive branch, so to speak, and he said, "It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, what matters is that you're a good person." It's a very simple sentence that turned my life upside down and put me on the path that I am on today. I became very vocal after speaking with my friends and realizing that there's a whole nother side of the story that I never heard. that just before I saw that tank as a kid driving on the streets of the refugee camp, there was a terrorist attack. That part of the story is always hidden from the Israeli Arabs and Arabs in general in the world. And I started becoming very vocal in Arabic to educate about the actual full picture, about Israel's side of the story in this debate. And I was persecuted. My family was pushed away from jobs, from work, from schools sometimes, insulted on the streets, attacked on the streets. It was a very hard time, but I decided not to stop and continue with whatever and continue with the path that I chose for myself. And here I am today, still on that path.
Fluent in Hebrew, a Zionist. Now, in your understanding, what does it mean to be a Zionist? Because Zionist is used as almost a curse word these days. So, in your opinion, what does it mean?
Zionism holds the word itself and the actual movement holds a very special meaning to me, and it should hold a very special meaning to the Arab world as well. And it did. The first Zionists after the Jewish people, after Zionism was defined and supported by the Jews, were the Arabs, because the Arabs were also just founded that their liberation movement just started. And King Faisal of Iraq was the first supporter of non-Jewish supporter of the idea of Zionism. And there's actually, it's online, you can go and see that an Arab king has supported a foundation of the Jewish state. So Zionism and Arab liberation as well comes very hand in hand since the very beginning. We see that the word is being used now in contrary to what it actually means. We see it as a curse, unfortunately, but at the same time, those people that use it as a curse, they claim to hold a very high value for people's liberation movements and people's freedom of choice and self-determination. How dare you assume somebody's feelings or somebody, but when somebody asks for liberation and have independence, suddenly for a certain group it's okay, for a different group it's not okay, and that's just anti-Semitic. So Zionism is a liberation movement. It has very close ties with the Arab world and the Middle East. And since as we all know, Jews come from this area, and it's not foreign to anybody over here.
That's amazing. I love that, because very often when people hear you stand with Israel, they think automatically, oh, you're against the Arabs, you're against the Palestinian people. And that's not true. That is so not true.
Absolutely.
So what would you want for your people, for the Arab Israelis, and how does Israel and the integration of Arab Israelis into Israeli society, how does that play a role?
Integration of Israeli Arabs and Israel's minority into the bigger Israeli society will make Israel a stronghold. Our diversity brings a lot of strength. With the fact that we have different people with different languages and different backgrounds call themselves Israelis under one flag and under one army, there's a lot of strength that comes from that. And also, whenever we also bring the Arab sector into this big dominant Israeli society, we're going to have an even stronger community. We see that our enemies, before they actually fire the first bullet at us and to attack us, they attack the home front first. And that is something that we should strengthen at all times.
Wow. All right, let's pick up your history. After school, you joined the IDF. Now tell us about that. You trained, you became a combat soldier, no less. Tell us about what are the values that are ingrained in the IDF? What did you learn? What does the IDF hold dear?
Yes, I went on a world tour to share my story.
You did before you became.
Yes.
I remember.
Just
this.
happens that I was in South Africa when the army called.
Really?
Yeah, it was 2018.
Eating some biltong, right?
Yes, biltong from Moshes. It was March 18th of March 2018. I got a phone call. I was in South Africa on Wits University campus, and the army asked me if I could draft tomorrow, just like that.
Oh, hi, Yahya.
Hi, yes.
What you doing?
Prior to that, a year and a half prior to that, I submitted the request, and there was a lot of tests and interviews and etc., etc. And they just gave me less than 24-hour notice. So I said yes. I changed my flight and I landed in Israel. And 24 hours later, I found myself with an amazing buzz cut and a green uniform and on my way to base. Going into base, the very first moments are very crucial. I was welcomed by my commander and my fire team class, and they welcomed me with open arms. I was worried that I would be the only Arab in my platoon, in my company, and I was very, very wrong. There were many Arabs, including the whole brigade, Bedouins, Christians, and Druze, and Ulim Khadashim, people that came from abroad to actually serve the state of Israel and help protect its people. So we found ourselves all together from all over the world, literally, and all over Israel, under one mission to protect Israel. I joined the Nahal Infantry Brigade. I was in the 50th Brigade, and I became a combat soldier after 8 months. And it is an experience. The amount of training that we went through was very, very harsh, but it prepared us very well to the harsh missions that we will do. I served in the Golan Heights, in the West Bank, and on the Gaza border. And towards the end of my service, I was in the School of Infantry, just towards the end of my service. And then I got released.
Tell us a little bit about the values that the IDF holds dear. What do they stand for? What did you learn? How did it make you a different person?
Absolutely. Joining the IDF, for me, as somebody who's never heard about the IDF, never heard stories, there's no stories being told about my IDF service for somebody from Al-Fahim. I remember one day waking up, and after just a few hours of sleep, I went to wash my face and brush my teeth. And I remember I washed my face and I lifted my head and I see myself on uniform, and it kind of like surprised me for a moment. It's a thing. It's at the beginning was a shock. And then I realized I was introduced to the Israeli culture more and more. One of the first things that you get as an IDF soldier is the IDF code of conduct, the spirit of the IDF, so to speak. And in it are the laws of the IDF. The very first law in the IDF is human dignity. And that really spoke with me and with many of my fellow soldiers. And that always remained with me on every mission that I did during my service. Because we, as the protectors of Israel, we were told to protect whoever is in need. Whoever is in need of protecting, we will protect them. We were not told to distinguish between a person and another. Whichever person was in need of help, the IDF soldier will be there to protect them and help them. I found myself in Palestinian cities, which is a very unique experience. I visited those cities, but to be there in uniform is very different. And I can recall one incident, moment. So I was standing in Hebron there to protect the status quo and make sure that everybody's safe. And one of the few kids, young kids, they come to play ball in the middle of the street. And there were cars coming back and forth. And I told them maybe it's, in Arabic, I told them maybe it's better to move to the side. And I remember they just stopped in their place. They never saw an IDF soldier speaking in Arabic, and because of my dialect in Arabic is a very old Palestinian one, so they were very surprised to how come this IDF soldier is speaking in like my grandfather.
And how did they react? Were they happy to see you? Did they talk with you?
Absolutely. So one kid went away while the other three came to me. Apparently that one kid went to tell the entire building, all the kids in the neighborhood. So I found myself, I finished my guard duty, and I sat next to the stand, and I found myself surrounded with kids, and they were asking me about how the IDF soldiers wake up, what do they eat, what do you do as an IDF soldier. It was very, very surreal moment to them for the actual kids to speak to an IDF soldier in Arabic, in their native tongue. And while I was speaking with them, it was like I was sitting in the chair and I had around me like 10, 11 kids. The brigadier for the entire area drives by, slams on his brakes. He comes to me and he's like, "Who are you?" And I said, "Hi, my name is Yahya." And he's like, "What's up with the kids?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just speaking with them." it was very surprising, even to our IDF commanders and to the actual people walking on the streets, the Arabs and the Jews, to see such a unique moment of coexistence. There was no violence, there were no orders, it was just plain talking and genuine interest in the other side. And that's what's really important, and that's how you build bridges.
I'm going to come back to that at the end of the interview, but for the moment, let's move on. We've spoken about the IDF values, the spirit of the IDF, the code of conduct. Now that sounds very nice, it sounds wonderful, but isn't it just a piece of paper? How does it get ingrained in you?
It gets ingrained in you because that's what you're trained on. We are trained to assess danger and avoid collateral damage at all costs. Our job as soldiers is to maintain a very, very cool spirit, even during times where things are very not calm around us. And the laws of opening fire and engagements are very, very aware of civilians in the areas where we operate. We were told that we are to avoid civilian casualties at all costs. And it's not me saying it. You can see it translated in reality when our Israel Air Force is about to target a person of interest, and we see civilians around them and civilian around the target, we cancel that airstrike. You can go on Google and see it. You could see thousands of evidence of IDF soldiers helping, playing, talking to the other side, and that's who we are. That's what Israel is. When we say that we support Israel, that is the short statement. The long statement is that we support Israel because Israel stands for Western values, for human rights, for freedom of speech. So we need to also remember that.
Indeed. Now we've spoken about the values that the IDF holds dear. We've spoken about what's ingrained in there. Can you contrast and compare that for me to what Hamas, what are the values that they stand for? What are the values that they hold dear?
Hamas is the Islamic Resistance Movement, acronymed Hamas, is a terrorist organization that operated in Gaza. They are, I don't want to say they have a connection even to the Arab world or to Islam, because in every turn, on every junction, Hamas has proven to be the furthest from such claims. They still operate under the name of religion to some extent. Hamas has two bodies. First, the civilian, and second is the military. The military wing of Hamas, called Izz al-Din al-Qassam Brigade. And in Arab culture, when you name something, you name it after something to mark its importance. And Izz al-Din al-Qassam was a Muslim clerk. He was an extremist of all meanings. He is known for selling his house and buying weapons with it to attack British and French forces. He is the backbone of the Hamas, the mentality of the Hamas's military wing. And we see that translated when Hamas attacks the people of Gaza, anybody who would speak against Hamas. Hamas has ruled over Gaza after winning in the election in 2006. After that, there were no elections. After that, there were hunger, there was oppression. There are many incidents that I can recount a lot of incidents, but we don't have enough time. Burying people alive, Gazans, killing people because they go against the flow. Hamas operates very, very severe drug trafficking circles within Gaza. They sell a lot of pills and drugs, including Keptagon, which is a pill used found on their actual fighters on October 7th. It's called the heroin of the poor. And Hamas has put the people of Gaza in such a perpetual state of stress and oppression to the point where you cannot make it in Gaza. The only way that you make it in Gaza, the only way you come back from work and go to the fridge and you have food in the fridge is if you are part of Hamas, both civilian and military. We see that the leaders of Hamas, both political and military, are going around the Arab world. Their wealth is very hard to count for. Billionaires speaking in the name of the Palestinian people, although most of them are not actual Palestinians. And very few of them have actually stepped a foot in Gaza. It's things that we have to circle back to. Hamas saw a very serious upgrade after their chief of staff, let's call him, Muhammad al-Masri, also known as Muhammad Deif. Muhammad Deif came into Hamas and he started reorganizing the whole military wing of Hamas to be more lethal. The aim of the military wing of Hamas is to kill Jews and destroy any Israeli icons and cities around the Gaza Strip and attack them. That's what they trained for years, and that's what they did on October 7th. He came and decentralized everything. He started a lot of non-conventional military departments. They have a cybersecurity department. They have a counterintelligence department. When we say Hamas, we don't mean people on a pickup truck with a machine gun. We mean actual terrorists that actually have some serious means, and they want to kill Jews. That's all they want. And the world kind of like brushed them to the side as another Iranian proxy. But we've seen on October 7th what they really wanted. So Hamas oppresses and kills the Palestinians in Gaza. Hamas will kill every Israeli at every chance, Jew or Arab, as we saw on October 7th. And this organization needs to be stopped. It's not, we call it Hamas ISIS in Israel, but I don't think even ISIS did the actions that Hamas did. It's much worse.
It is.
Much worse.
Now, Yahya, let's circle back for a moment because you mentioned the suffering in Gaza and everyone has seen the pictures and it's atrocious. It breaks your heart. But from what I understand and what you've been saying, that suffering didn't start when Israel retaliated after October 7th. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza started when Hamas took control in 2006. Hamas took out their rivals in a gunfight. By 2010, the Gaza Strip was clean of every rival of Hamas by force. Hamas since has infiltrated every single aspect of life in Gaza, civilian and military. We see Hamas infiltrating schools. Some of the teachers that actually teach the next generation of Gazans being actual Hamas members in their military wing. They use different names, different identities, made-up identities, and they go on to do their terrorist acts. Hamas has raised taxes on ridiculous things, including fish fished from the sea by the Gazans, including introducing tax on every aspect of life. And we have to understand the people in Gaza, they work for 12-hour shifts for $5 each day. And the prices are so inflated before the war. The prices were so inflated to the actual Gazan doesn't have enough money to eat, even if they're working 12 hours a day. The only way a person in Gaza will make it in life with respect and dignity is if he's part of Hamas. If you're not part of Hamas, you don't make it. Hamas uses a lot of violence against anybody. They strike with a fist of iron against the absolute simplest. Fines somebody who would build something in Gaza without permission, without paying the government, Hamas. They would come and demolish a house. I can recall one incident where they actually demolished a house with the people inside of it. The people were inside the house and they demolished the house while the people were inside of it. The loss of life that we saw on that day is no less important than the loss of life that we see today. Hamas has planned for years for that October 7th attack, but they have yet to plan for 1 minute of how they would protect their people and support them and stock food or anything. And this just shows us that Hamas actually wants the Palestinians to suffer and not to help them.
Yeah, this is terrible.
Yeah.
So I've heard an Israeli soldier say, people scream, free Palestine, free the Palestinians. I'm fighting for that. I'm fighting to free the Palestinians from Hamas. So the suffering, in your opinion, is all the responsibility of Hamas?
It's unfortunately we were dragged into this war. None of the Israeli officials woke up on October 7th and announced a military operation. So on October 7th at 6:15, Hamas launched this terrorist attack on Israeli communities. By 6:30, Hamas terrorists infiltrated into Israel, and their infiltration was accompanied by thousands of rockets fired at Israeli cities, fired indiscriminately. Each firing of those rockets is an international war crime. Hamas fired those rockets from civilian areas. And I have friends, as I said, in Gaza. I heard my friends say that Gaza looks like fog. It's full of fog now on October 7th. From how much rocket they fired at Israeli cities, the whole Gaza Strip turned out to be like fog. You couldn't see yourself.
Now we're speaking about civilian areas, apartment buildings.
Yes, apartment buildings, refugee camps. Hamas doesn't operate in open fields. Hamas operates behind the Palestinians. They put themselves and their families and everything that is important to them behind the average Palestinian because they know, and they have admitted on live TV that this tactic actually works because they know that Israel will value the life of the Palestinian and not target them. They know this. It's funny how Hamas knows this, but somehow it doesn't reach Harvard campus.
Indeed, no one but Israel's enemy understands this.
Yes, unfortunately.
It's crazy.
So after the attack started, first of all, there were radio silence. For the first hour of the attack, there was radio silence. Then suddenly, unfortunately, on Israeli groups, we started seeing videos of Hamas's military vehicles inside of Sderot. We saw an attack on a police car that was patrolling. Then later, we saw destruction from Be'eri. And we saw Hamas's news correspondents inside of the Israeli communities participating in the attack. Those freelancers, also recruited by foreign, Western media outlets. And the question begs itself. The question begs that who told those reporters about this is happening? Who told the reporter that on October 7th in the morning you should be here? We saw that many outlets, without being named, suddenly had an exclusive on that day. This really is an interesting question that should be asked. A few hours after the attack, many streets were closed. Israeli security personnel started mobilizing towards the communities. Unfortunately, just for a few hours that Hamas had control, just for a few hours that Hamas whenever they went into the communities, that was enough to havoc, an immense amount of destruction, to erase history of an entire families. I know in Kfar Gaza, which is a community where when I served in Gaza, that was the community that I was protecting. There's a neighborhood, they call it the young neighborhood. It's full of young families. Unfortunately, there's no young families anymore in that community. It is absolutely insane. Whenever we speak of the 1,200 Israeli victims that we lost on that day, each victim had a family, each victim had a name, each victim is a part of a bigger family that was affected on October 7th. And we're still counting the casualties. I heard from a friend of mine that whenever the electricity was not available in Gaza anymore, at the early stage of the war, because Hamas kidnapped Israeli dead bodies, they threw the Israeli dead bodies at the border. They took the bodies because they couldn't keep them in freezers anymore. They took the bodies, threw them on the border with dead Palestinians on the border as well. So you had a mountain of dead bodies. And they knew that the IDF is coming to collect those because there's a sense of respect of the body in Judaism. And they booby-trapped the bodies. They put grenades in them, and we lost the life of 2 soldiers to learn this trick. It was, again, this reflects what this movement represent. They would use everything, absolutely everything.
I'm shocked. I did not hear that before. Now, you know that Hamas afterwards published a document calling it Our Narrative. our side of the story. Of course, we wouldn't do something like that. We're Muslims. And as Muslims, of course, we couldn't do this. And we never, ever targeted any civilians. Care to comment?
They documented themselves. Hamas actually documented themselves killing Jews for the sake of just, for the charge of them being Jewish. They documented themselves. Hamas and many other organizations like Hamas are banned from all the Gulf countries except Qatar. So the Arab world rejects, the Muslim world rejects that ideology, and somehow it's still making its way in the Western world for some magical reason.
Interesting, huh? So even the Arab countries realize that this is something evil. This is not us. We will not stand with it. And yes, the Western, more democratic civilization seems to embrace it.
Unfortunately, yes. I can tell you, let's put it in perspective for a moment. Just like you and I and many others around the world woke up to the surprise terrorist attack on October 7th, a lot of the Arabs also woke up to this surprise. A lot of Arabs saw the videos and the pictures that we saw. And a lot of people, to even broaden it, the whole world, a lot of people maybe screamed from the river to the sea. They screamed something against Israel. And they never realized that those words that they're saying have a way and will be translated in real life into actions. So a lot of people, when they saw their words and support translated into actions by Hamas, they realized that this is not the right path forward. There was a 1 month long debate on Twitter between different Arab scholars and Arab activists on why Hamas just messed up the Palestinian cause for all the Palestinians worldwide. The Gazans, now is very common to say about with the Gazans, between the Gazans, that Hamas took us 50 years back in history.
You mentioned you have friends in Gaza. Is it actually what they are saying? Can you speak about what the people on the ground are feeling?
The average Gazan right now is feeling very disappointed and feeling hungry. Feeling very hungry. There is little to no food that Hamas is distributing, because the food is there. They're just not distributing the food.
So it's not Israel starving the people of Gaza?
No. We have to make things clear. Egypt is a vital player within this entire humanitarian aid circle. Egypt has facilitated an entire area and designated it for all the world, for the worldwide countries to come, build up mobile hospitals, to even airdrop their aid into Egypt so they can take it into Gaza. So the aid is being driven into Gaza. Now, this is on Egypt's side. If we teleport for a moment into the Gazan side, you see that the tents that are being given to the people of Gaza for free are being sold at a ridiculous amount of $1,000, $2,000 per tent. And on the tent it says, aid of Saudi Arabia, aid of the UAE, aid of Qatar. They are very, very public Hamas is very public with stealing aid and then selling it to the Palestinians. I can tell you that a single bag of flour for 25 kilos was worth 40 shekel before Hamas attacked Israel. Now, after the attack, the bag of flour, if you can find it, it was 40 shekel. Now it's 1,000 shekel. We're talking about more than 100% inflation rate, hundreds of percent inflation rate. Who's causing this? Hamas is a governing body. That means Hamas has a Ministry of Finance, has police enforcement agencies. They have all of this. And how come? This is a very vital question. How come from northern Gaza to southern Gaza, the same item is being sold at a fixed price? It would suggest that there is only one supplier.
Indeed.
The production of this investigative series is made possible by the generous donations of Christians from around the world. You can also make a difference by supporting this initiative. We want you to share, to give, and be a voice so that we can produce more series like this. The truth about what is happening here in Israel and around the world must be told, and it must go out. Please click on the link to donate.
Now, Yahya, I've spoken to your friend Colonel Richard Kemp about the way in which Israel fights this war.
Yeah.
Now, let's compare and contrast with Hamas's strategies, their tools, They're weapons of war. And the first, I want to start with the tunnels. Tell us about these tunnels. Because when we think tunnels, sometimes it's like, oh, you have to crawl through them. And is it as bad as we hear, or is it even worse?
So there are three types of tunnels. Whenever a terrorist organization dig tunnels in a guerrilla warfare, there are three types of tunnels. First type of tunnels is an attack tunnel. An attack tunnel is very short, very narrow. It's what people would know to crawl or vary this. It's very short to go from one building or one hiding spot to another hiding spot. The second type of tunnel is bunkers. Bunkers are used for command and control, headquarters. These bunkers are very big, very massive. The entrance is relatively tiny, but once you enter the tunnel itself, you realize that the tunnel is actually a multi-layer tunnel. There's a couple of layers to the tunnel. And at the bottom layer, there's the command center that Hamas is built. And the third and last tunnel type is a logistical tunnel. Those tunnels run very deep underground, are very, very massive. As the IDF exposed one of them next to the Erez crossing, those tunnels are very big, and they store logistical equipment, including diggers and weaponry and explosives and things that the Hamas doesn't want the IDF to see. So the first type of tunnel, the attack tunnel, is what the IDF is mostly encountering and combating. The headquarters and the logistical tunnels of Hamas were dismantled by the IDF by dismantling their internet infrastructure. Hamas has their own internet in Gaza. So once you take out the internet, the bunker is of no use because you can't communicate. The logistical is of no use because there is no communication between forces. So those are the type of tunnels that we encounter. And again, if we're speaking about tunnels, even the small attack ones that we're talking about, it takes months to dig out and prepare. And we see that Hamas prefers to invest money in tunnels to the point where there is not a single light stop in Gaza. It's all roundabouts.
And we're not talking about millions of dollars here. We're talking billions of dollars.
Billions.
What could they have done with those billions?
They took them. The estimates of the 3 leaders of Hamas, a single one of them can fix up the entire Gaza Strip, rebuild it to what it was. Every house, every street, every building, everything, and still be a billionaire.
And as they clearly said publicly, these tunnels are not for our civilians. No, not our responsibility. Although we are the governing body, this is just for us, just our fighters.
Yes, and to build a tunnel, you also have to dig out a lot of dirt.
Right.
So that's how you expose a tunnel. And surprisingly, some of the tunnels were actually found underneath international organizations' headquarters in Gaza. Organizations that claim to be neutral to this whole situation. We see and we understand that whatever organization operates within Gaza has to operate within the word of Hamas and within their permission. And if they don't allow them to operate. For example, we see the media outlet Al Jazeera being praised and supported by Hamas in Gaza, and the Saudi media outlet Al Arabiya was actually kicked out by force from Gaza before the conflict.
Why?
Because Al Arabiya wants to expose the truth. Al Arabiya reporter will film if Hamas fires from civilian areas. They will film them firing from civilian areas. So they physically kick them away from Gaza.
So they don't like the narrative, so you're gone.
Absolutely.
My goodness.
Absolutely.
Tunnels. Let's move on to human shields.
The use of human shields that Hamas has used is one of their main tactics. Hamas knows of how effective this strategy is, and they've claimed it and said it on Arab TV many, many times. They call upon the people of Gaza whenever Israel gives a vocal warning or in a form of phone call or a knock on the roof, which is a bomb that makes a loud sound. There's no explosives in it. And they call on the people of Gaza, Hamas calls on the people of Gaza to actually go on the roofs of their buildings, because they know, again, Hamas knows that Israel will not attack and harm civilians. And they know that this works. It's been tested, it's been proven, and they utilize it. They use a lot of the people. So whenever there's a civilian focused area, for example, right now a school. The schools in Gaza now are homes to thousands of families. They would go and operate within this school, knowing that a response is coming. And if the response doesn't come, let's say the Israeli response doesn't come, because there are a lot of civilians in that area, they will bring up their activity to the next level. We saw rocket launcher pads connected to mosques. So they were actually launching the rockets at Tel Aviv from the electricity that is hooked up to the mosque. We saw weapons and explosives being stored inside of schools. As we saw as well, tunnels underneath international organization headquarters. And it just continues on and on. So there's no respect for anybody, for any regime, for any organization, for any international body. And there's no respect for human life and respect for dignity of human life. We speak of this as Middle Eastern. The form of dignity, the concept of dignity and respect in the Middle East is very different than the one in the West. It's very offensive, for example, very offensive to go as a guest to somebody's house and refuse something that's given to you, something that is overlooked in the West. So we're speaking about two different cultures, and you can't exactly bring your Western values to the Middle East and expect them to work. And that's exactly what Hamas wants you. They want to bring Western values and human dignity and human rights and stuff, and they want to vocalize on that so they can continue with their terrorist actions.
So it's something of a mindset clash.
Absolutely.
And
I
the
can
West.
give you an example.
Yes, please.
So one example, during my service as an IDF soldier, I was stationed at the border on a Friday afternoon. My mission was, there was a lot of riots. They call it the Friday of Return. Around 8,000 people would come to the border and try to rush the border. And we had Israeli communities just a few hundred yards away from the border. Nachal Oz and Kfar Azza, that were very much attacked on October 7th, were the communities that I was in charge of protecting with many soldiers. And I was a sharpshooter. And our instruction was to take out the main central inciter that incites people. And we saw that for unknown reasons, that the first line of participants that we would see are kids. First line is kids. Second line is women. Third line is men, non-participants, just watchers. And then at the end, and the fourth and the last line, we see Hamas's vehicles, we see megaphones inciting people. For some reason, this resistance movement cannot resist unless their civilians are in front of them.
This is insane. So basically, I take my 3-year-old daughter to rush the border.
Absolutely. Again, if we take it to the Western world, it sounds crazy.
It doesn't make sense.
In the Middle East, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Explain it to me.
A lot of American soldiers as well saw this whenever they were fighting the Taliban. They saw the use of kids for war. And it's a very, very difficult thing to comprehend as a Westerner. Childhood and children we are very protective of them, but they are very much, in the eyes of terrorist organizations, they are very much a tool in this war. And if you ask any professor of Middle Eastern studies in the West of what he thinks of child soldiers and the use of children at war, I'm assuming that not a lot would have an opinion on that. But it is a legitimate thing to do in the Middle East, a legitimate thing. It doesn't make it right, but the moral compass in the Middle East is very different than the moral compass in America, let's say.
I think that's where a big disconnect come in, because it's simple for us to think or maybe believe that, oh, such an evil cannot exist, and therefore Israel, who has been the scapegoat for centuries, millennia even, they must be at fault.
Yeah.
Now, back to October 7th. Can you tell me what was your reaction when this happened?
So I live in the southern part of Israel. On October 7th, on Saturday, I woke up like a lot of Israelis to the red sirens, red alert, and I ran to the bomb shelter. And immediately after I went out, after 10 minutes, I looked up at the news because there was no reason for this to happen. And I saw that Mohammed Deif came out with a statement, the beginning of the operation of the Aqsa flooding, as they call it. And then I saw people talking. Even the Gazans were very confused on what was going on. And then the videos started coming up. Once I saw the videos of people, Israeli civilians being attacked and killed on the streets, I always have a bag ready for my military uniform and all of it. I called my commander and I told him I'm coming. He said, hold on, we're just getting things organized, hold on. And then a few days after that, I was called into the army. I was called into the army and I was called into the Gaza division to be there. I was there when the fighting was just beginning around the communities. My mission was to document all the destruction that Hamas has left behind them in our Israeli communities. And then after, I couldn't take it anymore, because you walk in and you see houses completely wiped out and the smell is just absolutely indescribable. I got another mission of going and speaking with the Israeli Arab families, that the Hamas has kidnapped their family members. Hamas, the Islamic movement Hamas, has kidnapped Muslims from Israel. So I went and I spoke with their families. We saw tens of Israeli Arabs, Muslim, killed and kidnapped. I remember hearing the news of a 5-year-old. He's left as an orphan because Hamas shot his mother, a Muslim woman with a head covering. So you can see it from afar. She's a Muslim woman. They shot her they shot her and killed her. And then when the father came to investigate what happened, they shot the father. So this speaks volumes of who those people are. I went around with the families, and a lot of the Israeli Arabs woke up to a surprise of this. A lot of the Israeli Arabs did not believe. And the straw that broke the camel's back was, as I said, Hamas documented themselves committing all those crimes. The straw that broke the camel's back was when there was a video that actually surfaced from a Hamas's GoPro. The video surfaced of a Jerusalemite, an Arab Jerusalemite, a resident of Israel, who was driving people to the Nova party. And Hamas's members caught him. And they asked him, they shook him from the shoulder, I remember, and said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm just a driver. I'm from Jerusalem." And he had the Jerusalemite accent in Arabic. And they said, "Are you a soldier? Are you a soldier?" He told them not to. And then at the end, we understood that they killed him. So this also showed that the people in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, if they're caught by the Hamas, they're not going to survive. And that really plummeted the support for Hamas. For 2 months, I was in the Southern District, the Southern Command, and the Gaza Division. And I was filming and documenting and working on campaigns to prepare the Gazans to understand that we are coming. In Arabic, I work in the Arabic department, and we worked around the clock to prepare a whole campaign for the civilians in Gaza and for the military wing of Hamas in Gaza to understand that the IDF is coming, and you better be prepared. The actual war crimes that were committed in our Israeli communities on October 7th is no more. There's not going to be a single threat that's coming from Gaza to Israeli communities, and Hamas's ruling is no more.
That's my question to the people out there screaming ceasefire, ceasefire. Pause, let it be, this is enough. What do you say?
There was a ceasefire prior to October 7th. A ceasefire, again, we go back to the norms of the Middle East and the norms of the US and the Western world. We call it a ceasefire. Hamas sees it as an option to rearmament. As soon as you cease fire, they will not feed their people. They will not help the injured. they will start relocating rockets so they could fire it more in Israel. So the people that are actually asking for a ceasefire, they have good intentions. But ceasefire would only prolong the suffering of the Palestinians and the prolonging of the Hamas's control over Gaza. As my late grandmother used to say, as she grew up in the refugee camp in the West Bank, she always said that when Israel controlled the refugee camp, it was much, much better than what it is now. And a lot of the old generations in Gaza understand that. And we see online a lot of people on the ground in Gaza are protesting, are saying no more to Hamas, are against Hamas, and are actually embracing the soldiers as they come, approaching the soldiers. So if the Palestinians themselves understand that the idea of soldier is no threat to them, somebody in the West is telling them otherwise and shouting otherwise. It's a shame. It's a shame.
I can speak with you all day long, but I have one final question for you. If you could speak to the people of Gaza tonight, the civilians, what would you say?
If I could speak to the people of Gaza tonight, right now, and everybody would hear me, I would say that your suffering is over. The fear that you have in your hearts, the suffering that you suffered for so long by the hands of Hamas, the ill intent that you felt your entire life, being feared, being afraid of Hamas and their actions against you if you speak up, is no more. Every time an IDF soldier takes a step forward in Gaza is another step that we take towards a more liberal Palestinian lifestyle in Gaza. And the people of Gaza understand that. And they are waiting. Even though they're not waving the Israeli flag and cheering on our soldiers as they approach, because they have still to understand that we are going to win this and Hamas is going to be no more. And I wait for the day. And you'll see, the end is going to be quick. The end of the war is going to be quick. A lot of the Gazans are going to go to the street and finish what the IDF has started.
May it be so. Yahya, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with us, and may it be so.